The G7 meeting wrapped up overnight. That's the meeting of leaders of the top 7 advanced economies, plus Australia's Prime Minister as an observer. It's finished with US President Donald Trump hinting that there may now be an end to his trade war with China. That's the tit-for-tat tariffs that have destabilised the world's economy.
I think they want to make a deal. I'm not sure they have a choice. And I don't say that as a threat. I don't think they have a choice. In the meantime, the United States, which has never collected 10 cents from China, will, in a fairly short period of time, be over $100 billion in tariffs. So I think they want to make a deal.
Joining me is James Morrow, opinion editor of the Daily Telegraph and co-host of The Outsider, Sunday mornings here on Sky. Marvellous ratings last Sunday. And I assume we'll soon be joined by Warren Mundine, parking his car at the moment, former Labor National Secretary and Liberal candidate at the last election. James Morrow, I don't really know if there is going to be an end to this trade war, but there's an aspect of this I think many people are overlooking, and it's important, particularly given what we've heard today about the arrest of an Australian. I think this is the first really serious challenge to totalitarian China stealing Western technology, rigging its currency, manipulating trade rules. Your view?
I think you're absolutely right, but I think that anybody who thinks that what Donald Trump does in terms of, ending a trade war because it's starting to hurt America a little too much and hurt China too much and coming together to make a deal here, that's not going to end the fundamental conflict that the West has with China, that the United States has with China, and that Australia has with China. China has its own very long-term game here, which goes beyond any election cycle in the West, any election cycle in the United States or Australia or anywhere else like that. They eventually want to be the dominant world power. So I do worry a little bit that if we take the pressure off at this stage, then we wind up with a situation where China is able to go back, regroup, and then push its case even harder down the track. And, of course, we also saw today, Andrew, the arrest of Yang Hengjun, the Australian citizen, which, shows that they are still playing for keeps. They're playing for keeps in Hong Kong. And I think just loosening up the trade war, I don't think that's going to change any of that.
I think that's absolutely correct. I don't think we can afford to relax the pressure on China, because I don't think America's going to get another president with the guts to call it out. Warren, what did you make of what James was just referring to, the arrest today of the Australian writer Huang Hengjun, and particularly the reaction of the Morrison government to him being charged with being a spy?
Oh, look, the major issue in the world at the moment is China. China's number 1, China's number 2, China's number 3. We've got tremendous problems that are happening in regard to Hong Kong, in regard to how China's acting on the global stage. You look at what's happening in South China Sea. They're a government that's in the last 10 years, since about post-2006, has changed and become a autocratic, typical autocratic dictatorship, and wants to throw a bit of its weight around. And how they do these things is very simple. We saw what happened to Crown Casino a few years ago with some of their workers. You've seen now what's happening with this. We're in a very delicate situation with them about how we handle this whole scenario. They're one of our major trading partners. They're a major tourist attraction. And this is where we've got to be very careful about putting our eggs all into one basket. We've got, I think the Morrison government actually is doing the right thing in regard to the South Pacific, actually engaging, getting things happening in the South Pacific. We will see what's happening in Papua New Guinea. We saw the trip to Vietnam. There should be a number of other trips. We need to get India, Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia, all these in our sphere of the world to have that counterbalance against the bullying of China. And China is, they're under enormous pressure at the moment because of the sanctions and the tariffs from the United States. And these things are only going to get worse, quite frankly.
Now, picking up on what Warren said, James, I agree with Warren that the diplomacy in trying to get a more united front against the Chinese threat is great. But the reaction from, here we have an Australian falsely accused of being a spy, held without charge of 7 months, now charged with something with a death penalty. I would have thought a little bit more than saying we're disappointed would be in order.
Oh, yeah, look, absolutely. And I think that this is really a case where the Morrison government has to get its house in order in terms of presenting a united front on all of this. You know, we saw how Andrew Hastie was criticized the other day for essentially predicting everything that's been going on since what he said. I mean, he was absolutely correct, and for him to be sort of nobbled by some of the other people in the government, I thought was a bit unfortunate. And then today, you know, all right, Maurice Payne comes out and says, you know, we're disappointed, so on, blah, blah. That's great. But then today also, the Deputy Prime Minister, Michael McCormick, was reported as saying that it's not up to me to say if I'm disappointed or not. That's a disgraceful thing to say when you're talking about, as you say, an Australian citizen who is being detained by this autocratic country that has no justice system like anything that we would recognize as a legitimate justice system. I think that when the Prime Minister gets back, he's got to come back and really get quite forceful about this. And it is not good enough to say, but we have a trading relationship. Well, you know what? There are more important things than trade. And as Andrew Hastie said, if we do not make decisions now, decisions will be made for us like they are already being made for our poor compatriot Yang Hangjun.
Are we really going to sell our freedom for dollars, Warren?
Well, this is the position that we're in court in, but that doesn't stop us from actually getting out there and working on this. We don't know what's happening in the background. I hope there's a lot of things happening in the background in regard to this, and we can't let ourselves be bullied and to be pushed around like this. You know, this is a very delicate situation. You know, Andrew Hastie actually belled the cat in regard to coming out and talking about that. I don't necessarily agree with his language in talking, bringing the Nazis in straight away. You know, we need to be forceful and to be straight up with the Chinese, but at the same time we cannot. We got to be very careful about how we handle this situation and work with our allies, because we're going to have our allies on side with the United States, Indonesia, Southeast Asia, and to really start, working towards how do we stop this push by China. Look, 10 years ago, prior to this president, they were very. They looked into themselves. The PLA, the People's Liberation Army, was focused on controlling their own people and doing these things. Now we're starting to see them actually starting to expand onto the global stage. There's some good things about that, like, for instance, now that they're hesitant about, really crushing the Hong Kong demonstrations because of what could happen in regard to those sanctions, in regard to their economy. But at the same time, they're using these little other areas where they're pulling in people, our own citizens, and arresting them and doing that. We've got to be strong with them, and we've got to be forceful, and they've got to come back and they've got to prove to our evidence, not their standard of evidence, why this person was detained. And they need to start, we need to start about how do we get these people out of there.
I think we need to speak up more. I mean, we have got to call this out, and freedom should not be for sale.